The calm evolution of coral reefs. Silent ecology for deep sleep. A journey into the heart of Earth's most peaceful ecosystems. Segment 1. The architecture of tranquility. Zones, structure, and the flow of life. Welcome, dear listener, to the tranquil world of coral reefs. As you settle into comfort, allow your mind to drift into this underwater sanctuary where time moves slowly and life unfolds in perfect harmony. Imagine yourself suspended beneath the waves in a place where 3 distinct zones create a world of breathtaking beauty and interconnected peace. Coral reefs are organized into 3 major zones: the forereef, the reef crest, and the back reef, which we also call the reef lagoon. These are not separate, isolated worlds, but rather a unified ecosystem where everything flows together in gentle exchange. Seawater moves between the zones, carrying with it sediments and nutrients, while marine life drifts peacefully from one area to another, all in a rhythm as old as the ocean itself. The reef surface is the shallowest part of this underwater landscape, a place where the sun's light reaches down and dances across the coral. This upper realm is subject to the gentle surge of waves and the rhythm of the tides. Waves passing over these shallow areas create a soft agitation, a constant soothing movement that corals have learned to thrive in. There is life in this motion, energy in this gentle dance. Light, that precious gift from the sun, penetrates these shallow waters in sufficient abundance for photosynthesis to occur. Within the tissues of the corals live millions upon millions of symbiotic zooxanthellae, tiny organisms that capture the light and transform it into nourishment. Each cubic centimeter of coral tissue shelters millions of these remarkable partners. They work tirelessly, performing their ancient alchemy, converting light into life. This agitated water you see moving across the reef surface brings more than just energy and light. It brings food. Plankton, those microscopic drifters of the ocean, are carried by the currents to feed the waiting coral polyps. It is a generous system where the movement of water itself provides for the nourishment of the reef. And here, in these clear waters, something extraordinary happens. Coral reefs grow much faster in clear water, which admits more sunlight and allows these zooxanthellae to perform their photosynthetic magic more efficiently. The clarity of the water is like a gift, enabling rapid growth and vibrant health. The relationship between corals and their zooxanthellae is one of the most profound partnerships in nature. Corals receive up to 90% of their nutrients from these symbiotic algae. This is not a parasitic relationship, but a true union, a meeting of 2 organisms that have become one functional being. The corals provide shelter and carbon dioxide for their partners to thrive, while the zooxanthellae provide the sugars and nutrients that the coral requires to build its skeleton and maintain its tissues. From this shallow realm stretches a web of life so complex and interconnected that it is almost impossible to imagine. Coral reefs support over 1/4 of all marine species on Earth. That means that 1/4 of every fish, every crustacean, every mollusk, every worm, every being that lives in the ocean finds its home, its shelter, its food source, its purpose within or around the coral reef. What an extraordinary responsibility these silent architects carry, and what a remarkable gift they give to the living world. Segment 2. The ecology of abundance, productivity, nutrient cycling, and the food web of dreams. As your breathing slows and deepens, let us explore the remarkable productivity of the coral reef ecosystem. In these waters, something miraculous happens every single day. Coral reefs produce 5 to 10 grams of carbon per square meter per day as biomass. This means that every day, every square meter of reef, an amount of living matter is created, added to the ecosystem, becoming food and structure and life. This happens continuously, year after year, creating one of the most productive ecosystems on the entire planet. The lagoons that form within and behind the reef fill gradually with material eroded from the reef itself and from the islands that the reef surrounds. This material settles slowly, creating a soft bottom that becomes a haven for creatures seeking shelter and food. These lagoons are nurseries, refuges, places where life finds protection and abundance. One of the most beautiful aspects of reef ecology is the way nutrients are recycled. The reef is a closed system in many ways, a place where nothing is wasted, where everything is used and reused and transformed. In the open ocean, nutrients are scarce, and what is lost sinks into the depths. But in the reef, recycling happens constantly, continuously, allowing the same nutrients to support life again and again. Recycling reduces the nutrient inputs needed to support the reef community, making the reef efficient and resilient. Within this realm, producers thrive in their quiet work. Phytoplankton, those invisible drifters, together with seaweed and coralline algae, form the foundation of the reef's food web. These producers, these primary creators, form the base of the food chain. They are eaten by fish and crustaceans, which are then eaten by larger creatures, on and on up the food web, each level supported by the layer beneath it. Deep within the reef live cyanobacteria, remarkable organisms that possess a special gift. Through a process called nitrogen fixation, they provide soluble nitrates, transforming atmospheric nitrogen into a form that other organisms can use. This is a quiet miracle happening in countless cells every moment. But the reef does not exist in isolation. It depends on surrounding habitats like seagrass meadows and mangrove forests for nutrients. These neighboring ecosystems contribute to the reef's nourishment. Seagrass and mangroves supply dead plants and animals rich in nitrogen to feed reef organisms. It is a generous exchange, a flow of life between communities. And the reef gives back. Reefs protect mangroves and seagrass from waves and strong currents, allowing these delicate ecosystems to establish themselves and flourish. The reef produces sediment that settles and becomes the foundation for mangrove roots and seagrass blades to anchor themselves. It is a perfect symbiosis, a three-way partnership where each member sustains the others. The nutrient recycling that happens in the reef is the key to understanding how such abundance can exist in the relatively nutrient-poor tropical ocean. The reef creates its own sustenance through perfect efficiency, through the careful reuse of every element, through partnerships and exchanges that have been refined over millions of years. Segment 3. The Deep Time of Climate and Evolution. How coral reefs have shaped our planet for 250 million years. Let your thoughts drift further back in time now, back through the ages, to understand the profound role that coral reefs have played in shaping the very climate and evolution of our world. Coral reefs have orchestrated Earth's climate for 250 million years. For 250 million years, these patient architects have been influencing the composition of our atmosphere, the pH of our oceans, the temperature of our planet. This is a time scale so vast that human civilization is but the smallest blink within it. The fossil record tells us a remarkable story. When reefs collapsed in the ancient past, more new kinds of plankton evolved. During periods when reefs were absent or diminished, new species of plankton emerged and diversified. But when reefs flourish and dominate, something different happens. When reefs dominate the oceans, calcium carbonate accumulates in shallow waters, making the water more alkaline. Calcium carbonate is the basic building block of coral skeletons, and when reefs are healthy and growing rapidly, enormous quantities of this material pile up in the shallow seas. This accumulation has a profound effect. Sequestering calcium carbonate in coral reduces the ocean's alkalinity, diminishing its ability to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. In other words, when reefs are thriving, they actually reduce the ocean's capacity to buffer against atmospheric carbon. The water becomes less capable of absorbing and storing carbon dioxide. When reefs decline, something different occurs in the ocean chemistry. Calcium concentration increases in the deep ocean, enhancing alkalinity and the ocean's ability to absorb carbon dioxide. The ocean becomes more efficient at removing carbon from the atmosphere, at buffering against rising atmospheric carbon levels. In this way, reef decline paradoxically makes the ocean more effective at moderating climate. The mode Earth operates in, whether it is a reef-dominated mode or a reef-diminished mode, significantly alters its response to rising atmospheric carbon levels. This is not a small effect. This is a fundamental difference in how the entire planetary system responds to change. When reefs flourish, recovery from carbon increases slows. The retention of dissolved minerals in shallow seas locked up in reef structures means that the deep ocean's buffering system is less effective. The system responds more slowly to attempts at recovery. During reef decline, recovery accelerates. The more robust oceanic buffering system, enhanced by the absence of calcium sequestration in reefs, allows the ocean to absorb and moderate carbon dioxide more effectively. This creates a faster path toward recovery from high atmospheric carbon. These alternating phases, reef dominance and reef decline, have persisted for over 250 million years, each one creating distinct conditions, each one shaping the climatic patterns of its era. They have shaped and been shaped by the biological evolution occurring in oceanic environments, creating a beautiful and complex dance between reef ecology and planetary climate. Segment 4. The Symphony of the Deep, Acoustic Landscapes and the Sounds of Life. As you sink deeper into relaxation, allow your ears to drift into an invisible realm. There is music here, a symphony that has been playing since before humans walked the earth. Coral reef soundscapes are dominated by intense biotic sounds in healthy reefs, sounds produced by living things. These are the voices of the reef, the conversations of creatures large and small. Fish snap their jaws, creating cracking sounds. Shrimp click their claws with remarkable percussion. Worms burrow and rasp. These sounds, the biophony as scientists call it, create a rich acoustic tapestry. But the reef soundscape is not composed of living sounds alone. Geophysical events like wind, waves, and rain generate perceptible sounds that we call geophony. The wind whistles above the water. The waves crash and surge. Rain drumming on the surface creates a patter that penetrates below. These are the voices of the physical world, the sounds of water and air in motion. And there is one more layer. Anthropogenic activities such as shipping and fishing produce perceptible sounds, sounds made by human activity. These sounds have become part of the reef soundscape in many places, though they are much newer arrivals than the sounds of nature. Listening to underwater soundscapes opens a new avenue for studying coral reef ecosystems. Scientists have discovered that healthy coral reefs are acoustically attractive to reef-associated organisms. Young fish larvae seeking a home navigate toward healthy reefs by listening to them, drawn by the acoustic signals that indicate a thriving community. Natural and anthropogenic disturbances produce abiotic sounds that can degrade reef soundscapes. When a reef is declining, when corals are bleaching or dying, the biotic sounds diminish. The snapping of fish jaws becomes less frequent. The clicking of shrimp decreases. The acoustic signature of the reef changes, becoming quieter, less complex. Anthropogenic noise can directly influence the physiology and behavior of marine organisms. Fish become stressed, their behavior patterns change, their reproduction is affected. Some organisms find it difficult to communicate with each other through the noise. Others become disoriented, unable to navigate. Noise pollution can reduce the resilience of coral reef ecosystems by masking biotic sounds. When the natural sounds of the reef are drowned out by human-made noise, the reef loses part of its ability to attract new recruits, to coordinate reproduction, to maintain the intricate acoustic communication that keeps the ecosystem functioning. But in healthy reefs, in quiet reefs, something remarkable happens. Fish sounds can form acoustic mass phenomena in spawning aggregations. When many fish gather to reproduce at the same time, their combined sounds create a crescendo, a magnificent chorus that can be heard by researchers with underwater microphones from great distances away. It is a sound of plenty, a sound of healthy reproduction. The diverse arrays of biotic sounds create unique soundscapes that function as habitat cues for marine larvae. Each reef has its own acoustic signature, its own particular symphony. Young organisms use these acoustic signatures to find their way home, to locate the specific reef where they will spend their lives. It is a form of long-distance communication, a beacon of sound guiding the lost home. Segment 5. The Majesty of Growth and Deep Time. The Great Barrier Reef and 20 million years of construction. Let us now focus on one particular reef, one magnificent structure that embodies the grandeur and patience of coral reef evolution. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living organism on the planet. Let that sink in. Not the largest ecosystem, not the largest structure, the largest single living organism. It stretches over 2,600 kilometers in length, a distance that would span an entire continent. The reef consists of 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands, each one a distinct structure, each one connected to the others through the flow of water and the exchange of life. The growth and evolution of this reef is over 20 million years in the making. 20 million years. That is a time span so vast that it is difficult for the human mind to truly comprehend. The reef is built on the backs and bones of many millions of years of coral. The skeleton beneath your imagined feet is composed of the calcium carbonate remains of countless millions of coral polyps, each one having lived and died and been built upon by generations of corals that came after. Within these deep reefs and across all reefs, the effect of light dominates over water movement in limiting carbonate production. Light is the primary factor that determines how much new calcium carbonate, new reef material, can be created. In places where sunlight penetrates, growth is rapid. In deeper places, where light is scarce, growth slows. Both light and water movement play a role in determining coral composition and vertical accretion rates. The type of corals that thrive in a particular location depends on both factors. Some corals prefer the bright, agitated, shallow zones. Others prefer the deeper, calmer waters. Some need strong flow. Others can survive in still water. Assemblages within 20 meters depth have the highest accretion rates, growing between 10 and 20 meters per 1,000 years. At these shallow depths, where light is abundant and water movement provides both energy and food, the reef grows at its most rapid pace. The framework of new calcium carbonate accumulates quickly, building upward. The history of the Great Barrier Reef shows that Holocene reef growth, the growth during the most recent geological period, largely occurred due to rapid sea level rise. As the oceans rose after the last ice age, new accommodation, new space was created for reefs to grow. Reefs can only exist in shallow water where light reaches. As the water level rose, the reefs rose with it, growing upward to stay in the sunlit zone. Reef evolution is shaped by changing ocean levels, island formation, and land settlement. The geological forces that raise and lower the land, that deepen and shallow the ocean, that create and destroy islands, all influence reef structure and composition. The reef is not a static thing, but rather a dynamic creation, responding moment by moment to the forces that shape it. The evolutionary history of modern corals is divisible into 3 distinct geological intervals. Each interval represents a different phase of reef evolution, different dominant coral species, different environmental conditions. The reef as we see it today is the product of these 3 great phases of development, each one building upon the foundations laid by the one before. Segment Psyches, the services of silence. Ecosystems. Services and the gifts reefs give. In the profound quiet of your deepening rest, consider the many gifts that coral reefs provide to the world, the services they offer beyond measure. Coral reefs provide complex and varied marine habitats that support a wide range of organisms. Each part of the reef, from the coral branches to the crevices in the rock, from the sandy bottom to the water column above, provides a unique habitat for different creatures. Some organisms need hard surfaces to attach to. Others need shelter from predators. Still others need shallow water for feeding. The reef provides for all of these needs, creating a mosaic of microhabitats within the larger reef structure. Fringing reefs just below the low tide level have a mutually beneficial relationship with mangrove forests at high tide level. The two ecosystems exist in perfect adjacency, with the reef protecting one and being protected by the other. They share tidal flows and nutrient exchanges. Reefs protect mangroves and seagrass from strong currents and waves that would otherwise batter and destroy them. The reef breaks the force of incoming waves, allowing these delicate organisms to establish themselves. In return, mangroves and seagrass protect coral from large influxes of silt, fresh water, and pollutants that would otherwise smother and poison them. It is a dance of mutual protection. Coral reefs are among the world's most productive ecosystems. Not the most productive in terms of sheer biomass per unit area, but among the most productive in terms of the rate at which new living matter is created and added to the system. They are factories of life, continuously creating new tissue, new organisms, new material. Reefs provide protection from waves and storms for marine life. During storms, when the open ocean becomes violent and chaotic, fish and other animals seek shelter within the reef. The complex structure of the coral provides thousands of hiding places, each one a refuge from the storm's fury. Reefs recycle nutrients with extraordinary efficiency. Much less nutrient recycling happens in the open ocean. Nutrients sink into the deep and are lost to the sunlit zone for years or decades. But in the reef, nutrients are captured and recirculated within the system continuously, held in the web of life, never wasted. Coral reefs support over 1/4 of all marine species. This extraordinary diversity, this incredible density of life, depends on the reef for survival. The loss of reefs would mean the loss not just of the corals, but of millions of species of fish, crustaceans, mollusks, worms, and countless other creatures. Coral reefs are crucial for maintaining marine biodiversity. They are biodiversity hotspots, places where the diversity of life reaches its peak. The reef's three-dimensional structure, its provision of countless ecological niches, its abundance of resources, all work together to create the conditions where vast numbers of different species can coexist. Reefs provide food, shelter, and breeding grounds for countless marine organisms. Young fish are nursed in reef environments, growing large enough to venture into the open ocean. Fish return to reefs to breed, gathering in enormous aggregations to reproduce. The reef is a place of life's beginning, a place where the future is created. Segment 7. The bonds of life, symbiosis, mutualism, and the partnerships that hold the reef together. Your heart rate is slowing now, your breathing becoming deeper and more regular. Drift deeper still into an exploration of the profound partnerships that give the reef its life and resilience. Corals and zooxanthellae have a mutualistic relationship, one of nature's most ancient and profound partnerships. This is not a relationship based on dominance or parasitism, but rather on mutual benefit and cooperation. Neither organism could thrive without the other, at least not in the shallow tropical waters where reefs are found. Corals provide shelter and carbon dioxide for zooxanthellae. The zooxanthellae live within the coral's tissues, protected from predators and from the harsh ultraviolet radiation that bombards the upper ocean. The coral maintains the zooxanthellae in an optimal environment, providing them with nutrients and a stable home. And the coral produces carbon dioxide, the basic building block that zooxanthellae need for photosynthesis. Zooxanthellae provide nutrients for corals through photosynthesis. They capture the energy of the sun and transform it into sugars and other organic compounds. Many of these compounds leak out of the zooxanthellae cells and are absorbed by the coral. In a very real sense, the coral is powered by sunshine, with the zooxanthellae acting as the solar panels that capture the light. Corals get up to 90% of their nutrients from their symbionts. This extraordinary dependency shows just how complete the partnership has become. The coral could not exist as we know it without these microscopic partners. They are not separate organisms sharing the same space, but rather a single biological unit, a fusion of two different forms of life. The symbiotic relationship is crucial for coral growth and reef formation. The rapid growth of reefs, the ability of corals to build their calcium carbonate skeletons so quickly, depends entirely on the photosynthetic output of their zooxanthellae. Without this partnership, corals would grow much more slowly and reefs would not form. Coral reefs are a haven for rare and endangered species. Many creatures found nowhere else in the world live only in coral reef ecosystems. Some fish species have territories only a few hundred meters across, entire populations contained within small patch reefs. If that reef is destroyed, that species may be lost forever. The reef's diversity allows rare species to find the particular conditions they need to survive. The symbiotic relationship is a key factor in reef resilience. Because the partnership is so complete, so finely tuned, a disruption to the partnership can have catastrophic effects. When water temperatures rise, the zooxanthellae become stressed and are expelled from the coral. This is bleaching, a white appearance caused by the loss of the pigments in the zooxanthellae. Without their partners, corals quickly starve and die. The relationship that gives them life can also be the source of their vulnerability. Coral reefs are a symbol of resilience and longevity. Despite their vulnerability to certain stressors, reefs have persisted for hundreds of millions of years. They have survived ice ages and warm periods, asteroid impacts, and supervolcano eruptions. They have adapted and recovered. They represent a kind of persistence, a testament to the power of life to endure. The symbiotic relationship is a source of inspiration for scientists and conservationists. In studying these partnerships, researchers discover principles that apply far beyond the reef. The coral zooxanthellae relationship demonstrates how cooperation and specialization can create something far greater than either partner could achieve alone. Coral reefs are a living legacy of Earth's ancient past. In the reef, you are looking at a system that has been refined over millions of years. Every structure, every partnership, every interaction has been shaped by vast stretches of evolutionary time. The reef is a window into deep time, into the slow processes of evolution and adaptation that have created the diversity of life. Segment 8. The Rhythm of the Reef. Dynamics, cycles, and the dance of life and death. As your consciousness begins to drift further into the dream realm, Imagine yourself witnessing the constant cycles and transformations that define reef existence. Coral reefs are dynamic with constant growth, death, and replacement. This is not a static world, but one of constant change, constant transformation. Corals grow, adding their skeleton to the reef. Then they sicken and die, their skeleton remaining as a base for new growth. Other corals colonize the dead skeleton, using it as a foundation. The reef is a graveyard and a nursery all at once. The reef is a mosaic of different ages and stages of growth. If you could observe a reef for long enough, you would see that different parts of the reef are at different stages of development. Some areas are young, recently colonized, growing vigorously. Other areas are old, the coral skeletons heavily eroded, covered with encrusting organisms. Still other areas are in the intermediate stages, mature but still growing. This patchwork of different ages creates a kind of visual texture, a pattern that speaks to the reef's age and complexity. The reef is shaped by natural disturbances like storms and temperature changes. A hurricane might destroy large sections of reef, breaking apart coral heads and scattering the rubble. A temperature spike might bleach the zooxanthellae and cause mass coral death. These disturbances are not aberrations in an otherwise peaceful system, but rather part of the reef's normal experience. The reef has evolved to expect disturbance and to recover from it. The reef is a haven for succession, with new growth replacing old structures. Ecological succession, the process by which an ecosystem develops and changes over time, is written across the reef. In places where coral has died, algae first colonize the bare rock. Then small corals settle and begin to grow. Gradually, over years and decades, a new coral community develops, eventually reaching a mature state similar to the community that was destroyed. The reef is a source of resilience, able to recover from disturbances. This resilience is built into the reef's structure. The diversity of species means that if one species is wiped out in an area, others are present to fill its role. The reproduction rate of corals and fish means that populations can recover within a few years or decades. The reef has been shaped by millions of years of disturbance and recovery, making resilience a fundamental characteristic. The reef is a haven for biodiversity, with each species playing a unique role. Every organism in the reef, from the largest fish to the smallest bacterium, plays a role in the reef's functioning. Remove any species and the dynamics change. The more species present, the greater the number of different roles being fulfilled, the more stable and productive the system becomes. The reef is a source of stability, able to withstand extreme conditions. Despite the challenges that the reef faces, despite the disturbances and stresses that impact it, the reef endures. This stability, this capacity to maintain function despite external pressures, is one of the reef's most remarkable characteristics. It is a stability born of diversity and of millions of years of evolution. The reef is a haven for rare and endangered species. Many creatures are found nowhere else in the world. Some have populations so small that they teeter on the edge of extinction. The reef provides the specific habitat that these species need. Protect the reef, and you protect these species. Lose the reef, and many unique organisms will be lost forever. The reef is a source of inspiration for conservation and environmental protection. those who have studied reefs, those who have dived beneath the waves and witnessed the complexity and beauty of reef ecosystems, emerge with a profound sense of the importance of conservation. The reef inspires action, inspires people to dedicate their lives to its protection. The reef is a living legacy of Earth's ancient past. When you stand on a coral reef or drift above one, you are standing on a structure that has been built over millions of years. Beneath your feet or below you, the skeleton of the reef is composed of the calcium carbonate remains of countless organisms, each one having lived and died, contributing to the structure that exists today. Segment 9. Conservation and the future. Threats, resilience, and the path forward. Your eyelids grow heavy now, but your mind remains alert, floating through an exploration of the challenges and hopes that define modern reef conservation. Noise pollution has received little attention in coral reef conservation until recently. For decades, scientists and conservationists focused on pollution, overfishing, and climate change. Noise was overlooked, considered an inconvenience, but not a real threat. Now, researchers understand that acoustic pollution is a serious problem that affects the health and functioning of reef ecosystems. Anthropogenic noise can directly influence the physiology and behavior of marine organisms. Fish in noisy environments show signs of stress. Their cortisol levels, the stress hormone, are elevated. Their behavior patterns change. Some fish stop feeding or reproduce less frequently. Others become disoriented, unable to navigate using the sensory systems that evolved to work in quiet waters. Noise pollution can reduce the resilience of coral reef ecosystems. Resilience, the ability to recover from disturbance, depends on many factors, including the health of the constituent populations and the ability of organisms to recruit new individuals to replace those that are lost. Noise interferes with recruitment by masking the acoustic signals that larvae use to find suitable habitat. It interferes with reproduction by making it difficult for fish to hear the mating calls of potential partners. Conservation efforts focus on protecting reefs from pollution, overfishing, and climate change. These remain the primary threats and the focus of most conservation efforts. Pollution in the form of nutrients, silt, and toxic chemicals smothers reefs and poisons the organisms that live in them. Overfishing removes key species, disrupting the balance of the ecosystem. Climate change causes warming waters and acidification, stressing the zooxanthellae and making it harder for corals to form their skeletons. Reefs are threatened by rising sea temperatures, ocean acidification, and extreme weather events. These three threats are intimately connected to human-caused climate change. Rising temperatures directly stress coral and cause bleaching. Acidification caused by the ocean absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere makes it harder for corals to build their skeletons. Extreme weather events, like stronger hurricanes and typhoons, physically destroy reef structures. Conservation measures include marine protected areas, sustainable fishing practices, and reef restoration. Marine protected areas, regions where fishing is limited or prohibited, allow reef ecosystems to recover from overfishing and allow fish populations to rebuild. Sustainable fishing practices involve selecting only fish that can be taken without damaging the ecosystem and using methods that do not damage the reef structure. reef restoration involves actively assisting reef recovery by transplanting corals or cleaning algae off reef surfaces to give corals better chances to survive. Public awareness and education are crucial for reef conservation. People are more likely to support conservation efforts if they understand why reefs matter, how they are threatened, and what can be done to help. Education can inspire people to change their own behaviors, to support conservation-friendly policies, to donate to organizations working on reef protection. Reefs are important for coastal protection, fisheries, and tourism. This is both a conservation argument and a utilitarian one. From a practical standpoint, reefs prevent coastal erosion by breaking the force of incoming waves. They support fisheries that provide food and livelihood for hundreds of millions of people. They support tourism industries that generate billions of dollars annually. The economic argument for reef conservation is as strong as the environmental one. Healthy reefs are more resilient to environmental changes and disturbances. A reef that is not stressed by local stresses like pollution or overfishing has more capacity to cope with regional stresses like warming or acidification. A reef with high diversity has more stability than a reef with low diversity. A reef that has recovered recently from a disturbance may have less resistance to a new disturbance. Health and resilience are not the same thing, but they are closely related. Conservation measures must address both global and local stressors. Global stressors like climate change require global solutions, changes in energy production and consumption that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Local stressors like pollution and overfishing require local solutions, specific management practices tailored to particular reefs and particular communities. Both are necessary for reef conservation to succeed. Segment 10. The sensory world of the reef. Light, color, scent, and touch in the realm below. Let your other senses now come alive in this visualization as you explore the sensory richness of the underwater realm. The dappled light of coral reefs is calming and soothing. Sunlight penetrates the water and is scattered and broken by the surface ripples, creating patterns of light and shadow that shift and flow. These shifting patterns create a sense of movement and life without any threat. The light itself carries warmth, carries energy, carries the feeling of life and growth. The gentle play of light and shadow is ideal for sleep. The constant subtle changes in brightness, never harsh, never jarring, provide just enough variation to engage the visual sense without overstimulating it. The eye perceives the changes in light and shadow and feels soothed by them, as if rocked by a gentle motion. The reef's natural light promotes a sense of relaxation and well-being. Colors in the reef are vibrant, saturated with the hues of life. Reds and oranges and yellows and greens and blues fill the water. These colors are not harsh or artificial, but natural, muted by the water through which they pass. The eye taking in these colors feels nourished, feels at peace. The reef's gentle light is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. Contrast this with the harsh artificial light of the human world, light that comes from above, light that creates sharp shadows, light that is often too bright and too blue. The reef's light is different, softer, more diffuse, more natural. It invites relaxation rather than alertness. The reef's ambient light is perfect for restful sleep. As the sun sets and the light from above fades, the reef transitions to twilight and then to darkness. Many reef creatures are active during the night, creating a nocturnal ecosystem that operates in moonlight and starlight and bioluminescence. The gradual transition from day to night is natural, following the rhythm that humans evolved with, the rhythm that regulates our sleep. The reef's natural ambience is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. Every element of the reef, from the light to the water to the sounds, all work together to create an environment that feels safe and restorative. There are no threats in the imagination of the sleeping mind. There are no stresses, no demands. There is only the gentle, constant presence of life and light and water. The reef's gentle rhythms and cycles promote a sense of peace and well-being. The reef operates on multiple cycles: the daily cycle of light and darkness, the tidal cycle of about 12 hours, the seasonal cycle of temperature and weather changes. These cycles are not jarring or chaotic, but natural, predictable, steady. A mind attuned to these cycles feels in harmony with the natural world. The reef's ambient light is ideal for meditation and mindfulness. The practice of meditation involves focusing the mind on the present moment, allowing thoughts to come and go without attachment. The slowly shifting patterns of light in the reef provide a natural focus for meditation. The eye can rest on these patterns, the mind can follow the gentle shifts in illumination, and a state of calm focus emerges naturally. The reef's soothing environment is perfect for restful sleep. Every sensory input in the reef environment, every sight and sound and feeling, is geared toward peace and relaxation. The reef does not challenge or threaten. It does not demand or require. It simply is beautiful and peaceful, an invitation to rest and recover. The reef's natural ambience is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. The human mind, evolved to be alert to threats and challenges, spends much of its time in the modern world in a state of vigilance. The stress response, the fight or flight reaction, is activated frequently. The reef's environment, with its absence of threat and its presence of beauty, allows the nervous system to downshift, to shift from the sympathetic arousal of alertness to the parasympathetic relaxation of rest and recovery. Segment 11. The sense and tactile world. The olfactory and tactile dimensions of reef experience. As you drift deeper into the embrace of sleep, allow your imagination to engage with the more subtle sensory dimensions of the reef. The earthy scent of coral reefs is calming and refreshing. When researchers and divers bring samples of coral and reef material to the surface, a distinctive smell emerges. It is not unpleasant. It is a complex scent, with earthy and briny notes, with hints of salt and minerals and living tissue. This scent carries information about the reef's chemistry and biology. The smell of damp coral and seawater is soothing for sleep. The combination of the ocean's salt smell, the sharp ozone produced by the interaction of sunlight and water, and the more subtle organic scents from living organisms creates a multifaceted olfactory experience. This smell is associated with relaxation, with vacation, with escape from the demands of daily life. Breathing in this scent, even imagined, triggers associations with peace and calm. The reef's natural aromas promote a sense of relaxation and well-being. Scent is one of the most direct pathways to emotion and memory. A particular smell can instantly transport a person to a moment from their past, triggering associated emotions and feelings. The scent of the reef, whether real or imagined, carries associations of peace and natural beauty that elicit relaxation. The reef's gentle scents are ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. The scents of the reef are not aggressive or overwhelming. They are subtle, complex, layered. A person breathing in reef scents slowly becomes aware of different notes in the overall scent, the way one becomes aware of different instruments in an orchestra. This process of discovery, of gently exploring the scent, is inherently calming. The reef's ambient smells are perfect for restful sleep. As a person drifts towards sleep, the senses gradually become less acute. Smell, however, can be perceived even in sleep, and even subtle scents can influence dreams and the quality of sleep. The gentle reef scents, whether real or imagined, provide an olfactory environment that promotes restful sleep without being obtrusive. The reef's natural ambience is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. When all the senses are engaged in the reef environment, when the eyes see the shifting light, the ears hear the gentle sounds, the skin feels the motion of the water, and the nose smells the reef's distinctive scents, the mind comes into alignment with nature. The artificial stressors of the modern world fade into the background, displaced by the gentle presence of the reef. The reef's gentle rhythms and cycles promote a sense of peace and well-being. The physical sensations of the reef, the tactile dimension of being immersed in warm tropical water, the pressure of the water against the skin, the gentle rocking motion of the waves and currents, all create a sensation of being supported and held. This tactile experience is deeply soothing to the nervous system. The reef's ambient scents are ideal for meditation and mindfulness. As meditation deepens, the meditator becomes more aware of subtle sensations. The scent of the reef, even if faint, becomes an anchor for attention, a focal point for the meditation. The mind follows the subtle shifts in scent as they arise and pass away, practicing the fundamental meditation skills of attention and non-attachment. The reef's soothing environment is perfect for restful sleep. The combination of all the reef's sensory inputs, the visual beauty, the acoustic richness, the chemical signals of the scents, the tactile sensations of immersion in water, creates an environment that is, on every level, conducive to relaxation and sleep. There is no part of the reef experience that jars or stimulates alertness. The reef's natural ambience is ideal for unwinding and letting go of stress. The reef asks nothing of the observer. It does not require analysis or response. It simply exists in its beauty and complexity. To observe the reef, to immerse oneself in the reef's environment, is to practice acceptance and surrender, to let go of the need to control and direct, to allow oneself to be carried along by the natural flow of life. Segment 12. The Interconnected World. Nutrient flows, food webs, and the integration of reef life. Your breathing has become slow and deep now, your mind floating in the peaceful realm between wakefulness and sleep. In this state, contemplate the invisible flows that bind the reef together. In the reef, every organism is connected to every other organism through flows of energy and matter. A fish eats a crustacean, which ate algae, which captured sunlight. The energy from the sun, captured and transformed at each step, eventually powers the fish. When the fish dies, its body becomes food for scavengers and then for bacteria. The minerals that made up the fish's skeleton are incorporated into the sediment or become building blocks for new organisms. These flows are not one-directional. They are cyclical and interconnected. Producers capture the sun's energy. Herbivores eat the producers. Carnivores eat the herbivores. Scavengers and decomposers break down the dead, returning nutrients to the producers. The cycle continues, moment after moment, year after year. The reef's biodiversity ensures that no resource is wasted, that no niche remains unfilled. If one species dies out, another can often fill the role. If food becomes scarce for one type of organism, another type, eating something different, can thrive. This redundancy, this diversity, is the source of the reef's stability. In the lagoon, the waters are rich with the suspended remains of reef life. The mud of the lagoon floor is a graveyard and a garden, a place where the dead nourish the living. Bacteria break down organic matter, releasing nutrients that are absorbed by growing algae. These algae are eaten by small animals, which are eaten by larger animals, which are eaten by fish that eventually return to the reef. The lagoon is not separate from the reef, but an extension of it, an integral part of the reef ecosystem. The mangroves and seagrass surrounding the reef participate in the same flows of energy and matter. Dead leaves fall from the mangroves into the water. These leaves are broken down by bacteria and fungi, and the nutrients they contain flow into the reef. Fish born in the reef spend part of their life in mangrove nurseries, protected by the root systems, feeding on the abundant small organisms. When they mature, they return to the reef. The mangroves and reef and seagrass are not separate ecosystems, but parts of a single integrated system. Every stream that flows from the land into the reef carries dissolved minerals and organic matter. Every storm that stirs up the sediment brings nutrients from the deep to the surface. Every current that sweeps through the reef connects it to distant reefs and distant ecosystems. The reef is not isolated, it is part of a larger system, connected by flows of water and organisms to the entire ocean. When we damage a mangrove forest or pollute a seagrass bed, we damage the reef, even though the reef itself may be far away. When we disrupt deep ocean currents through climate change, we disrupt the nutrients and larvae that the reef depends on. When we change the composition of the air through greenhouse gas emissions, we change the chemistry of the ocean, and thus the ability of corals to build their skeletons. Everything is connected. The reef teaches a lesson about interconnection and dependence. No organism in the reef is truly independent. Every creature depends on others for food, for shelter, for the maintenance of the chemical environment in which they live. This interdependence is not a sign of weakness, but of integration. It is this integration that gives the reef its stability and its productivity. To understand the reef is to understand that the world is not made of separate, independent things, but rather of flows and cycles and relationships. The atoms in our bodies were once part of coral skeletons or fish bodies or plants. In the future, our atoms will become part of other living things. We are not separate from the reef. We are part of the same web of life. Segment 13. Closing meditation on the eternal reef. As your journey through the world of coral reefs draws to a close, allow your consciousness to settle into the deepest peace, into the most profound rest. The coral reef has been here for millions of years. Long before humans walked the earth, the reefs were growing in the tropical seas. Long after humans are gone, the reefs will be here, changed perhaps, reshaped by the forces of evolution and climate, but still present, still alive, still creating and sustaining the abundance of the ocean. In contemplating the reef, we contemplate deep time. We think about processes that happen over millions of years, slowly, imperceptibly, yet with profound effects. We think about the slow accumulation of calcium carbonate, one tiny grain at a time, building mountains of limestone. We think about the slow evolution of species, each generation slightly different from the one before, generation after generation, resulting in the incredible diversity of life we see today. The reef teaches us to slow down, to think on longer timescales, to understand that the most important processes in the world often happen slowly, invisibly, beyond the scope of our immediate perception. The reef teaches us patience, resilience, the power of persistence and cooperation. In contemplating the reef, we are also contemplating ourselves. The same elements that make up the reef make up our bodies. The same energy from the sun that powers the reef powers us through the food we eat. The same cycles of growth and death, of production and consumption, of building up and breaking down, that characterize the reef also characterize our own bodies and our own lives. The reef is a mirror in which we can see ourselves, a reflection of our place in the natural world. We are not separate from nature. We are nature. The reef is not something external, something to be studied or exploited or preserved. The reef is ourselves, made visible, made external, so that we can begin to understand the nature that we are. When you dream of the reef tonight, when you drift through those waters in your sleep, understand that you are not imagining something distant or separate. You are imagining yourself, imaging the life from which you came and to which you will return. You are imagining the fundamental processes of life, the same processes that are occurring in your own body at this very moment. The reef is peaceful because it operates without the illusion of separation, without the sense of individual beings struggling against each other. In the reef, each organism plays its role, knowing or not knowing that it is part of a larger whole. There is conflict in the reef, yes. Predators eat prey. Organisms compete for resources. But beneath the drama, there is harmony, a functioning system where every death creates life, where every loss is transformed into growth. This is the peace that awaits you in sleep, the peace that is your natural state. not the absence of activity or change, but the surrender to the flow of existence, the acceptance of being part of something larger than yourself, the knowledge that you are held and supported by the intricate web of life that has been weaving itself for billions of years. In this moment, as you rest, as you sleep, as you dream of the reef, you are part of that web. You are part of the flow of energy and matter that moves through all living things. You are part of the reef, and the reef is part of you. There is no separation, no boundary, no distinction between the observer and the observed. Rest now in this knowledge. Rest in the peace of the reef. Rest in the knowledge that you are held by the patient, eternal forces of life and growth. Rest in the cycles of day and night, of breathing in and breathing out, of sleeping and waking. These are the same cycles that move through the reef, that have moved through the reef for millions of years, and that will continue to move through it for millions of years to come. The reef is still. The reef is eternal. The reef is home. And in sleeping, in dreaming, in opening yourself to the quiet presence of the reef, you are coming home to yourself. Sleep now, dear listener, into the gentle darkness. Sleep into the silence of the deep. Sleep into the peace of the reef, where light dances on the water, where life flows in endless cycles, where every breath you take is connected to the breathing of billions of other living things. The reef dreams, and in your dreams, you become the reef. You become the light, the water, the life, the eternal flow. You become peace itself. Rest well. Segment 14. The Microscopic World. Zooxanthellae, Bacteria, and the Invisible Architects. Continue now with us into the realm of the unseen, into the world of microscopic organisms that, though invisible to the naked eye, are the true architects of the reef. Zooxanthellae are not truly algae, but rather dinoflagellates, single-celled organisms that possess characteristics of both plants and animals. They are remarkably simple in structure, yet extraordinarily complex in their chemistry. Within their tiny cells, they contain chlorophyll and other photosynthetic pigments that capture the energy of the sun and transform it into the sugars that power both themselves and their coral hosts. These microscopic organisms exist in such vast numbers that they form clouds of life within the coral tissue. A single coral polyp, barely visible to the naked eye, contains thousands upon thousands of zooxanthellae. A larger coral colony, which might be several meters across, contains billions of zooxanthellae. The collective mass of zooxanthellae in the reef represents a biomass comparable to that of all the fish in the reef combined. The zooxanthellae are not randomly distributed within the coral tissue. They occupy specific cells called zooxanthellae cells, which are arranged in a layer just beneath the coral's outer skin. This arrangement is no accident. It positions the zooxanthellae in an optimal location to capture sunlight while remaining protected within the coral's tissues. The coral has evolved an architecture specifically designed to house and support its microscopic partners. The reproduction of zooxanthellae is as remarkable as their photosynthesis. When conditions are favorable, the zooxanthellae reproduce through a simple process called binary fission, where a single cell divides into two identical daughter cells. Under good conditions, a zooxanthella population can double in a matter of days. This rapid reproduction ensures that as corals grow and their tissues expand, the zooxanthella population keeps pace, maintaining the perfect balance between host and symbiont. But zooxanthellae are not the only microscopic organisms crucial to the reef. Cyanobacteria, sometimes called blue-green algae, are among the oldest organisms on Earth. They have been photosynthesizing for more than 2 billion years, and in doing so, they were responsible for creating the oxygen atmosphere that all higher life depends on. In the reef, cyanobacteria play an equally vital role, fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere and making it available to other reef organisms. Bacteria throughout the reef play roles we are only beginning to understand. Some bacteria help corals digest food. Others produce compounds that discourage predation or disease. Still others form symbiotic relationships with other reef organisms, providing services in exchange for food or shelter. The bacterial communities of the reef are as diverse as the visible fauna, with hundreds of different species living in every pinch of reef sediment. Viruses, though often thought of as agents of disease, actually play important roles in reef ecology. Viruses infect bacteria and phytoplankton, controlling their populations and releasing the nutrients locked in their cells back into the water where other organisms can use them. In this way, viruses, though the smallest of reef organisms, help regulate the flow of nutrients through the reef ecosystem. The metabolic chemistry occurring in the reef's microscopic organisms is a wonder of nature. Photosynthesis converts light energy into chemical energy stored in the bonds of sugar molecules. Nitrogen fixation converts inert atmospheric nitrogen into usable forms. Chemosynthesis, a process occurring in some bacteria, converts chemical energy from compounds like hydrogen sulfide into life. The reef is a place where all these different forms of energy transformation occur simultaneously. These microscopic organisms are sensitive indicators of reef health. When water conditions change, when temperature rises or pollution increases or light decreases, the microbial communities respond first. Scientists studying reef health often look at microbial populations as early warning signs of environmental stress. The invisible world beneath the visible world speaks volumes about the reef's condition. The study of reef microbiology is one of the most active areas of coral reef research. Scientists are discovering that the reef microbiome, the totality of microbial communities associated with the reef and its organisms, is vastly more complex and important than previously realized. Disruption of these microbial communities can cascade through the reef ecosystem, affecting larger and larger organisms until the entire system is destabilized. Segment 15. The architecture of survival. Reef structure, branching patterns, and the engineering of life. Let your mind now explore the magnificent architecture of the reef itself, the structures that house and protect the reef's inhabitants. Coral skeletons are not solid structures, but rather sophisticated chambers and passages designed to house living polyps. Each coral polyp occupies a small cup-like structure called a calyx, from which it extends its tentacles to feed. The architecture of a coral colony is a three-dimensional puzzle, each polyp positioned to minimize competition for water flow and food while maximizing the capture of sunlight and nutrients. Different coral species have evolved different architectural strategies. Branching corals, shaped like the limbs of trees, present maximum surface area to the water, allowing their polyps to access plankton-rich currents. Brain corals, with their massive bouldered forms, have a structure that maximizes volume while minimizing surface area, creating a fortress-like shape that is more resistant to wave damage. Encrusting corals form thin plates on reef surfaces, finding shelter in the shadows of larger corals while still managing to photosynthesize by positioning themselves at angles that capture available light. The growth patterns of coral colonies follow geometric principles that optimize resource capture while conserving energy. Corals grow in fractal patterns, with smaller branches appearing at progressively smaller scales, each one following the same basic architecture. This self-similar pattern allows the coral to fill space efficiently, to ensure that water flow reaches all parts of the colony, and to position each polyp optimally for feeding. The calcium carbonate skeleton that corals build is composed of two distinct crystal structures. The outer skeletal material is composed of aragonite, a form of calcium carbonate that is denser and harder than the more common calcite. The inner material may have a different structure. This two-part architecture provides the skeleton with properties similar to reinforced concrete, combining hardness and strength with some flexibility. The building of the skeleton is an active chemical process, not a passive accumulation. The coral must extract calcium and carbonate ions from the seawater and concentrate them in the space between the outer epithelium and the skeleton. This concentration creates a region of supersaturation where calcium carbonate crystals precipitate and build the skeleton. The coral maintains constant control over this process, adding material precisely where it is needed. Reef Framework provides a three-dimensional habitat for countless other organisms. The branches and crevices of coral colonies provide shelter for fish, for crustaceans, for mollusks. The gaps between coral heads accumulate sediment and serve as nurseries for small organisms. The surfaces of corals host encrusting communities of coralline algae, sponges, and other organisms. This three-dimensionality is unique to coral reefs. Unlike a sandy bottom, which offers little shelter, the reef's architecture creates an infinite number of microhabitats. Reef construction also involves many organisms besides corals. Coralline algae deposit calcium carbonate, acting as a living cement that binds coral rubble together and fills gaps between coral heads. Sponges, which are prolific throughout reefs, create openings and tunnels through the reef structure as they filter feed. Boring organisms, such as sponges, bivalves, and worms, excavate tunnels through the coral skeleton. These borers seem to be damaging the reef, but they actually help by creating passageways for water flow and by preventing the reef from becoming too densely packed. The reef structure is not a permanent fixed thing, but rather in constant flux. New coral heads grow, old ones die and are broken apart by waves and biological erosion. The rubble from broken corals becomes the foundation for new coral growth. Over time, the shape of the reef changes, but its function remains constant. It is always a living structure, always growing, always providing shelter and food. The engineering of the reef is superior in many ways to human engineering. Coral structures are built by organisms themselves using abundant renewable materials. They are flexible, able to bend and flex with wave force rather than resisting it rigidly. They are self-repairing, with living organisms constantly maintaining and rebuilding the structure. They are biodiverse, serving as habitat for thousands of other organisms while performing their function. Human engineers are only beginning to learn from the principles embedded in reef structures. Segment 16. The cycles of abundance, reproduction, recruitment, and the perpetuation of life. As you drift deeper into peaceful contemplation, consider the remarkable reproductive strategies that ensure the reef's continuation into the future. Coral reproduction happens through two distinct pathways: asexual reproduction through budding and fragmentation, and sexual reproduction through the release of eggs and sperm. Asexual reproduction allows a successful coral individual to create clones of itself, spreading along the reef surface or expanding into new territory. Sexual reproduction, though more energetically costly, creates genetic diversity and allows coral populations to adapt to changing conditions. Many reef corals are broadcast spawners, releasing their eggs and sperm into the water column simultaneously. The synchronization of spawning across an entire reef is one of the most remarkable phenomena in nature. On a particular night, triggered by temperature and light cues, millions of coral colonies around a reef release their gametes at nearly the same moment. The water becomes clouded with a slurry of eggs and sperm, creating a feeding frenzy for fish and other organisms seeking this sudden abundance of food. The synchronization of spawning is thought to be controlled by multiple cues acting together. The time of year determines reproductive readiness. The timing of the moon sets the date. The water temperature confirms the conditions. The light from the moon or stars or bioluminescent organisms triggers the actual release. Multiple cues ensure that spawning is precisely synchronized, that the chances of eggs being fertilized are maximized. The coral larvae that result from sexual reproduction are tiny transparent planulae, barely larger than a grain of sand. Despite their microscopic size, these larvae are remarkably complex. They have light-sensing organs called ocelli. They have muscle cells that allow them to swim. They have the ability to detect chemical signals released by adult corals and by coralline algae, allowing them to locate suitable settlement habitat. The larvae drift in the plankton for days or weeks, carried by currents sometimes hundreds of kilometers from their parent reef. During this planktonic period, many larvae are eaten by fish and other organisms. Many die from disease or starvation. Of the millions of larvae released by a single coral colony, perhaps a dozen will survive to reach adulthood. The larvae that survive are those that by chance avoided predators and found suitable habitat. Settlement is triggered when a larva encounters the right combination of environmental cues. Chemical signals released by coralline algae, signals that indicate the presence of an established reef, attract larvae toward the reef surface. The bacteria living on the reef surface release compounds that further trigger settlement. The sound of the reef, the acoustic signature of a healthy, productive reef, attracts larvae and guides them towards suitable settlement sites. Once a larva has settled, it metamorphoses rapidly, transforming from a free-swimming larva into a sessile polyp. the larva develops a mouth and tentacles. It begins secreting calcium carbonate to form its first skeleton. Within hours of settlement, the metamorphosed larva, now called a juvenile coral, begins to feed on plankton and to photosynthesize through its zooxanthellae. The early growth of a juvenile coral is rapid if conditions are favorable. A young coral that lands in a protected spot with good water flow and abundant light can grow several centimeters per year. A young coral that lands in a poor spot, in deep shadow or strong surge, grows slowly, if at all. Many juvenile corals die within the first year, unable to compete with larger organisms for space or to survive the challenges of reef life. After several years of growth, if a juvenile coral has found a favorable location and avoided disease and predation, it reaches reproductive maturity. It begins to produce eggs or sperm. It participates in the synchronized spawning event that occurs once per year. Now it is not merely a consumer of the reef's resources, but a producer, creating the next generation of corals that will maintain the reef into the future. The recruitment rate, the number of juvenile corals that settle and survive, is highly variable from year to year and from location to location. In some years, recruitment is abundant, with so many larvae settling that they cover available space. In other years, recruitment is nearly absent, with few larvae surviving to reach the reef. Environmental conditions, water temperature, storm damage, the health of the plankton that larvae feed on, all influence recruitment rates. Segment 17. The predators and grazers. The role of consumption in reef balance. Continue your journey into understanding the dynamic balance of predation and consumption that keeps the reef in harmony. Parrotfish are among the most important grazers on the reef, removing algae from coral surfaces and preventing algae from overgrow the corals. Parrotfish feed by scraping their beak-like teeth across the coral surface, consuming algae and small invertebrates. As they feed, they produce sand, grinding the coral skeleton into fine particles that eventually become beaches. A single large parrotfish can produce several kilograms of sand per year. The presence of parrotfish is crucial for maintaining coral dominance on the reef. In areas where parrotfish have been overfished, algae proliferate, covering and smothering corals. Algae-dominated reefs are less diverse, less productive, and less resilient than coral-dominated reefs. The loss of parrotfish, seemingly a small thing, can trigger a cascade of ecological changes that transform the reef from coral-dominated to algae-dominated. Sea urchins also play an important role as grazers, consuming algae and helping to maintain the balance between corals and algae. Sea urchin populations are normally controlled by predators, particularly sea stars and large fish. When sea urchin predators are overfished, sea urchin populations can explode, and these herbivores can graze the reef until almost no algae remains. Predatory fish regulate herbivore populations and consume smaller fish, keeping fish populations in balance. Large predators, the apex predators of the reef, feed on smaller fish and are themselves subject to fishing pressure. The removal of large predators can trigger cascading changes throughout the food web as the abundance of smaller predators increases, altering the entire structure of the fish community. Invertebrate predators, including octopuses, mantis, shrimp, and various species of snails and worms, play important roles in controlling populations of small invertebrates. These predators are often cryptic, hiding in crevices during the day and emerging at night to hunt. Their predation pressure, though not visible, shapes the composition of the reef's invertebrate communities. The balance between predator and prey is not static but dynamic, constantly shifting in response to environmental conditions. A year with abundant food allows prey populations to increase. Predator populations follow, increasing in response to the abundance of food. As predator abundance increases, prey becomes scarcer and predator populations decline. Prey populations increase again, following the decline of predators. This dynamic oscillation keeps both predator and prey populations within limits that allow them to coexist. Carrion feeders, including some fish and invertebrates, consume the dead bodies of reef organisms, preventing the accumulation of dead matter and returning nutrients locked in bodies back to the living reef. These often overlooked organisms play a crucial role in the reef's nutrient cycling, preventing disease and decay from taking hold. Parasites and disease organisms are present in reefs, but are normally controlled by healthy immune systems and by the physical and chemical defenses that reef organisms produce. A stressed reef, one weakened by pollution, temperature stress, or low food availability, may see disease outbreaks as organisms become vulnerable. The relationships between consumers in the reef are often complex and indirect. A disease that kills fish may increase populations of zooplankton that the fish would have consumed, which may in turn reduce populations of zooplankton-feeding corals. An increase in predator abundance may reduce prey abundance, which may force predators to eat alternative prey, which may indirectly affect plants that the alternative prey consumed. These indirect effects make it difficult to predict how changes in one species will affect the rest of the reef. Understanding these complex relationships is crucial for reef management. Protecting only the corals is not sufficient. The entire food web must be maintained. Herbivores must be present in sufficient numbers to control algae. Predators must be present in sufficient numbers to control herbivores. The balance must be maintained across all the different feeding groups. Segment 18: Disease and Resilience, Health Challenges, Adaptation and Recovery. Let your mind now contemplate the challenges that reefs face, the diseases and stresses that threaten their existence, and the remarkable resilience they display. Coral diseases are increasing in frequency and severity around the world. White band disease, caused by unknown bacterial pathogens, spreads across coral colonies, killing living tissue while leaving the skeleton behind. Yellow band disease creates bands of discolored dying tissue that gradually expand across coral surfaces. Black band disease, caused by cyanobacteria, spreads like a dark line across coral colonies, killing the coral polyps as it advances. The causes of most coral diseases are incompletely understood. Some diseases are clearly associated with increased water temperature. Others seem to be opportunistic infections that attack stressed or weakened corals. Some diseases appear to be caused by specific bacteria or other pathogens. Understanding the causes of coral disease is essential for developing treatments and preventive measures. Water quality is intimately connected with coral disease. Reefs receiving runoff from agricultural and urban areas, polluted with excess nutrients, sediment, and chemical contaminants, experience higher rates of disease. The excess nutrients promote algae growth, which competes with corals and may harbor disease organisms. The sediment smothers corals and clogs their tissues. The chemical contaminants stress the coral's immune systems. Temperature stress is one of the most significant disease-promoting factors. As water temperature rises due to climate change, corals become stressed. Stressed corals are more vulnerable to disease. Many diseases show increased prevalence at elevated temperatures. Temperature stress also contributes to bleaching, the loss of zooxanthellae, which leaves corals weakened and more susceptible to disease. Coral bleaching occurs when water temperatures rise even a degree or two above the coral's tolerance range. The heat stress causes the coral to expel its zooxanthellae, the symbiotic algae that provide most of the coral's nutrition. Without the zooxanthellae, the coral's brilliant colors fade to white. The coral can survive bleaching if temperatures return to normal and the zooxanthellae repopulate the coral's tissues. But if temperatures remain elevated or the bleaching is severe, the coral starves and dies. Resilience, the ability to recover from disturbance, depends on multiple factors. A healthy coral with high food availability and good water flow can recover from bleaching more quickly than a stressed coral. A reef with high biodiversity can recover from the loss of key species more readily than a reef with low diversity. A reef that has recovered recently from past disturbances may be less resilient to a new disturbance than a reef that has had time to build up reserves. Recovery from bleaching can take years or decades. The zooxanthellae must repopulate the coral's tissues. The coral must rebuild its reserves of energy. The coral's reproduction may be suppressed for years as energy is devoted to recovery. Multiple bleaching events in close succession, with insufficient time for recovery between events, can reduce the reef's capacity to recover and may lead to permanent changes in the reef's composition. Corals have some capacity for adaptation to temperature stress. Corals maintained in elevated temperatures in laboratory settings show some ability to acclimate, to become more tolerant. Some research suggests that some coral populations may harbor heat-tolerant zooxanthellae or develop heat tolerance through adaptation. However, the pace of global warming may be too rapid for corals to adapt, particularly given the long generation time of many coral species. Management strategies to enhance resilience include reducing local stressors like pollution and overfishing, which stress corals and reduce their ability to cope with climate-driven temperature increases. Marine protected areas where fishing is prohibited or limited allow fish populations to recover, increasing the control of algae and improving reef health. Reducing sedimentation through better land management reduces the physical stress on corals and improves water quality. Restoration efforts are underway in many places, with researchers actively cultivating corals in nurseries and transplanting them back to reefs. These efforts can be successful in small areas, but scaling up restoration to repair reefs damaged over large areas remains a major challenge. Restoration cannot substitute for addressing the root causes of reef decline, particularly climate change. Segment 19. The future of coral reefs. Scenarios, solutions, and hope for tomorrow. As your journey nears its conclusion, contemplate the future that awaits the world's coral reefs and the choices that will determine whether they persist and flourish or decline toward extinction. Climate models project that if greenhouse gas emissions continue at current rates, most coral reefs will experience temperatures in excess of coral tolerance thresholds for most of the year by the end of this century. The frequency and intensity of bleaching events will increase. More reefs will transition from coral dominance to algae dominance. The diversity of reef ecosystems will decline. The services that reefs provide, from coastal protection to fisheries to tourism, will be severely diminished. Ocean acidification, the process by which the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and becomes more acidic, will make it increasingly difficult for corals to build their skeletons. The saturation state of the ocean, the degree to which the water is supersaturated with respect to calcium carbonate, will decline. Corals will need to expend more energy to build their skeletons. Growth rates will decline. The balance between calcification and dissolution will shift toward dissolution, with skeleton material being broken down faster than it is built up. However, not all reefs will disappear. Some reefs in locations where water is deeper or where upwelling brings cool water will experience less warming. Some corals may prove more heat tolerant than currently believed. Some corals may adapt more quickly than we expect. Reefs in marine protected areas, where fishing has been prohibited for decades, show greater resilience and better recovery from bleaching. Limiting global warming to lower levels, such as the 1.5 degrees Celsius target proposed in international climate agreements, would dramatically improve the outlook for coral reefs. At lower levels of warming, bleaching events would be less frequent and less severe. Corals would have more time to recover between disturbances. The rate of ocean acidification would slow. More reefs would persist in viable condition. The transition to renewable energy sources, the reduction in fossil fuel consumption, the protection and restoration of forests that serve as carbon sinks, the development of technologies to capture carbon from the atmosphere, all contribute to reducing the rate of climate change. Every fraction of a degree of warming prevented means additional reefs that will survive, additional species that will persist, additional ecological functions that will continue. Beyond climate action, local management of reefs remains important. Protecting reefs from overfishing allows fish populations to recover. Reducing pollution through better land and water management improves water quality. Eliminating destructive fishing practices allows damaged reefs to recover. Establishing marine protected areas gives reefs the space and time to adapt to changing conditions. Coral restoration is expanding as a field, with nurseries breeding corals and genetic researchers seeking out heat-tolerant strains. Though restoration cannot replace the need to address climate change, it can play a role in maintaining genetic diversity and helping reefs to recover from local disturbances. In the future, restoration may become more important if reefs decline more severely than currently expected. Indigenous knowledge and traditional management practices are increasingly recognized as important for reef conservation. Many indigenous communities have managed reefs sustainably for centuries, using practices that maintain ecosystem health. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern conservation science offers promise for more effective reef protection. Education and outreach remain crucial. Public support for reef conservation is growing as more people understand what reefs are and why they matter. Ecotourism, carefully managed, can provide economic incentives for reef protection. When people visit reefs and witness their beauty firsthand, they are more likely to support conservation efforts. The next decade is critical. The decisions made in the coming years about greenhouse gas emissions, about reef protection, about conservation funding, will largely determine the fate of coral reefs in the coming century. Hope remains as long as we act, as long as we recognize the importance of reefs and commit to their protection. Segment 20. The Timeless Dance. Reflections on cycles, eternity, and connection. As you reach the deepest levels of sleep, as your consciousness dissolves into the dream realm, ponder the vast cycles and the eternal nature of the reef. The reef operates on multiple overlapping cycles: the daily cycle of light and darkness, the tidal cycle of roughly 6 hours between high and low tide, the monthly cycle of the moon's phases, the annual cycle of seasons and temperature changes, the multi-year cycles of El Niño and La Niña, the decadal cycles of changing ocean currents, the century-scale cycles of ice ages and warm periods, the million-year cycles of continental drift and mountain building. Each cycle operates at a different scale, and each influences the reef in different ways. The shortest cycles are the fastest, flickering across the reef like the heartbeats of the reef's biology. The longest cycles are slow, almost imperceptible, playing out over timescales so vast that they seem to be background constants rather than cycles at all. Yet all these cycles interact. A seasonal temperature fluctuation might be amplified or dampened by a longer-term trend. A multi-year climate oscillation might trigger or prevent a coral spawning event. Within these cycles, the reef maintains a kind of dynamic stability. From day to day, the reef looks much the same. From year to year, slow changes accumulate. From decade to decade, the reef might shift from dominance by one coral species to dominance by another. From century to century, the reef might migrate to deeper or shallower water as sea level changes. From million years to million years, the entire reef might be replaced by a different reef as species evolve and adapt. This constancy within change, this stability achieved through constant transformation, is the nature of all living systems. A human body maintains its form from day to day, despite the fact that nearly every cell is replaced within a few years. An ecosystem maintains its character despite the fact that individual organisms are constantly being born and dying. The reef maintains its identity as a reef, despite the fact that individual corals are constantly growing and dying. The reef has been performing this dance of stability and change for millions of years. It will continue to perform it in the future, though the form that the dance takes may change. If humans succeed in limiting climate change, the reef of the future may resemble the reef of today, a world of brilliant corals and diverse fish, a sanctuary of life. If humans fail to limit climate change, the reef of the future may be a very different place. one dominated by algae and hardy species, a shadow of its former self. But the reef in some form will endure. Life is resilient, evolution is powerful. The ocean covers most of the planet, and life has proven its ability to adapt to nearly any condition. Even if tropical coral reefs, as we know them, are greatly diminished, the reefs of the future, whatever form they take, will be expressions of the same fundamental principles of life that have been operating for billions of years. In contemplating the reef, we contemplate the nature of existence itself. We see that all life is interconnected, that nothing exists in isolation, that every being is both supported by others and supports others in turn. We see that stability is achieved through change, that death is always followed by life, that loss is always transformed into new forms of existence. The reef teaches us to think on longer timescales, to understand that the changes that matter most happen slowly over timescales that are difficult for human minds to grasp. It teaches us to appreciate complexity, to recognize that in a system as intricate as the reef, seemingly small changes can have vast consequences, and that understanding requires both looking at the large picture and appreciating the finest details. The reef teaches us humility, the recognition that we are part of something vastly larger than ourselves, that our actions ripple out in ways we cannot fully predict or control, that our responsibilities extend far beyond our immediate interests. The reef teaches us that there is no separation between ourselves and nature, that we are nature, made in the same image as the fish and the coral and the zooxanthellae. In the ancient reefs, in the rocks that were once reefs hundreds of millions of years ago, we can read the story of the ocean's past. In the living reefs of today, we can see the ocean's present. In the reefs of the future, we will know whether we chose wisdom or folly, whether we acted in time to preserve the systems that support all life, or whether we allowed them to be diminished in the pursuit of short-term gains. The choice is ours. The reef waits, patient and eternal, continuing its slow dance regardless of our actions, though our actions will determine the nature of that dance. The reef invites us to join in, to dance along with it, to align our actions with the long-term health and flourishing of the systems that sustain all life on this planet. Segment 21. Deep Waters and Twilight Zones. The forgotten reefs below the sunlit realm. Drift now with me into the deeper waters, into the twilight zones, where fewer sun rays penetrate and different communities of reef organisms thrive in the dim light. The mesophotic zone, the twilight zone of the reef, extends from about 60 meters depth to about 200 meters depth. Light penetrates to these depths, but dimly filtered through the water above. Only about 1 to 5% of the surface light reaches these depths, yet this light is sufficient for photosynthesis to occur, and a remarkable assemblage of corals and other organisms has adapted to thrive in this dim realm. The corals of the mesophotic zone are often different from those of the shallower reef. Many are pale in color, having evolved to capture the dim light more efficiently. Some have larger polyps, adapted to capture plankton from the water with greater efficiency. Some have evolved different growth forms, spreading horizontally to intercept available light, rather than growing upward as shallow corals do. Zooxanthellae in mesophotic corals have often adapted to capture and utilize light more efficiently. Some zooxanthellae species are different from those found in shallow corals, having different photosynthetic pigments that absorb the wavelengths of light that penetrate to these depths. The symbiotic partnership between coral and zooxanthellae is maintained, but has been refined to work in the dimmer conditions of the deep. The mesophotic zone is less well studied than the shallow reef, so it was only recently recognized how diverse and productive these deep reefs truly are. Submersibles and deep diving equipment have revealed the existence of large coral communities at depths that were previously thought to be too deep for corals to survive. Some mesophotic reefs rival shallow reefs in their diversity and coral coverage. The mesophotic zone plays an important role in the overall reef system. During times of stress at the surface, such as during bleaching events triggered by high water temperatures, surface corals may suffer high mortality, while mesophotic corals, insulated from the warmest waters by depth, experience less stress. These deep refuges allow coral populations to persist through periods when surface conditions are unfavorable. Fish and other organisms also inhabit the mesophotic zone. Some species spend their entire lives at these depths. Others migrate between shallow and deep water, spending the day in the deep and rising to the shallow reef at night to feed. The connectivity between shallow and deep reef systems is an important factor in reef resilience. Below the mesophotic zone lies the aphotic zone, where no sunlight penetrates. Here, where the reef depends on the steady rain of organic matter from above rather than on photosynthesis, a different community of organisms has evolved. Sponges are particularly diverse and abundant in the deep ocean. Corals continue to be present, often with large polyps and efficient filter feeding mechanisms. The coral zooxanthellae symbiosis, dependent on light, cannot exist in the aphotic zone, but corals themselves, sustaining themselves by filter feeding, can thrive. The deep-sea coral communities are home to organisms found nowhere else in the world. The slow growth rates and stable conditions of the deep sea have allowed species to evolve that are highly specialized to their particular environment. Some deep-sea corals have generation times measured in centuries, making them among the slowest growing organisms on Earth. Deep-sea ecosystems are vulnerable to disturbance. The slow growth rates that characterize deep-sea organisms mean that recovery from disturbance is extremely slow. Fishing with bottom trawlers, which scrapes the ocean floor and destroys deep-sea coral communities, can cause damage that will take centuries or millennia to repair. The protection of deep-sea ecosystems is increasingly recognized as a conservation priority. The vertical connectivity of reef systems, the exchange of water and organisms between shallow and deep waters, is important for the health of the entire system. Nutrients brought up from depth by upwelling currents support productivity in shallow waters. Larvae produced in shallow waters drift down to settle on deep reefs. The reef is not a system that operates in isolation at a single depth, but rather an integrated whole extending from shallow waters to the abyss. Segment 22. The Voices of Change. Climate oscillations and the reef's response to planetary rhythms. Allow yourself now to perceive the great climate oscillations that move through the Earth system, setting the rhythms to which the reef dances. El Niño and La Niña are the largest year-to-year variations in global climate. El Niño occurs when the tropical Pacific Ocean warms, redistributing heat around the globe and triggering droughts in some regions, and excess rain in others. La Niña is the opposite phase, when the tropical Pacific is cooler than average. These oscillations occur roughly every 3 to 7 years and have profound effects on weather patterns around the world. Coral reefs respond dramatically to El Niño and La Niña. El Niño conditions often bring warmer water to reef regions, sometimes triggering bleaching events. The 1998 El Niño caused massive bleaching across coral reefs around the world, killing an estimated 40% of the world's corals. Some reefs took a decade or more to recover from this event. Subsequent El Niño events have also caused significant coral mortality. La Niña conditions often bring cooler, nutrient-rich water to reefs, potentially creating favorable conditions for coral growth and recovery. Reefs in regions affected by La Niña have been observed to recover more readily than reefs in other regions. The cycle between El Niño and La Niña creates an oscillation in reef conditions, periods of stress followed by periods of recovery. The Atlantic multidecadal oscillation is a pattern of long-term changes in sea surface temperature in the Atlantic Ocean, occurring on timescales of 30 to 80 years. This oscillation influences rainfall patterns and hurricane activity over the Atlantic and around the Caribbean. Reefs in the Atlantic experience periodic shifts in conditions driven by this oscillation. The Pacific Decadal Oscillation is a similar pattern in the Pacific Ocean, with even longer timescales operating over decades. This oscillation influences the strength of currents, the upwelling of deep water, and the recruitment of plankton that reefs depend on. The phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation influences whether a given year is favorable or unfavorable for coral recruitment and growth. These oscillations are not random, but follow patterns that can be predicted based on ocean temperatures and other variables. However, the predictions are probabilistic, not deterministic. It is known that an El Niño will occur roughly every 3 to 7 years, but the exact timing and intensity of each event cannot be predicted more than a season or two in advance. Climate scientists have discovered that these oscillations will continue to operate in the future, overlaid on top of the long-term warming trend caused by human-induced climate change. Future El Niño events will be warmer than past ones, because the baseline ocean temperature will be higher. This means that bleaching events associated with future El Niño events will be more severe than past events, even if the El Niño itself is no more intense than past ones. Understanding these climate oscillations is important for reef management. During years when conditions are favorable, efforts can focus on reducing local stresses like pollution and overfishing, allowing reefs to build resilience. During years when conditions are unfavorable, reefs should be protected from additional stresses to the greatest extent possible, preserving their capacity to survive the stress. Predicting the future state of the reef requires understanding these climate oscillations and how they interact with the long-term trends driven by climate change. A reef that is stressed by an unfavorable climate oscillation while simultaneously experiencing unprecedented levels of anthropogenic warming, may cross a threshold from which recovery becomes impossible. The interaction between climate oscillations and long-term climate change represents one of the most urgent challenges for reef conservation. Reefs that might survive either climate oscillations alone or long-term climate change alone may not survive the combination of the two. Understanding and anticipating this interaction is crucial for developing effective strategies to preserve reefs. Segment 23. The hidden diversity. Cryptic species, nocturnal communities, and the reef after dark. As your awareness drifts into the dream state, explore with me the hidden diversity of the reef, the species that are active when sunlight fades, and the organisms that hide by day. The nocturnal reef is a different world from the daytime reef. Many creatures that are hidden away by day emerge under the cover of darkness. Creatures that were active during the day seek shelter and rest. The acoustic signature of the reef changes as different animals call out in the night. The activity patterns shift entirely. Nocturnal invertebrates, including shrimp, crabs, and worms, emerge from their daytime hiding places to feed. The abundance of nocturnal invertebrates rivals that of daytime invertebrates, suggesting that the reef supports a double community of animals, one active by day and one active by night. This temporal partitioning of the reef allows it to support more animals than would be possible if all were active at the same time. Nocturnal fish, including many species of squirrelfish and big-eye fish, emerge from daytime shelters to feed on plankton in the night waters. These fish, adapted with large eyes to capture every available photon of light, are perfectly suited to hunting in the dim night. Their activity patterns are guided by the light of the moon, with more activity on moonless nights when their large eyes give them a relative advantage over other hunters. Bioluminescence is common in the deep sea, but rare in shallow reef waters. However, some shallow water reef organisms, particularly dinoflagellates and some small fish and crustaceans, are capable of producing light. When disturbed, dinoflagellates produce light in a spectacular display, potentially to deter predators or to attract other organisms. The exact function of bioluminescence in shallow water is not fully understood. Cryptic species, animals that are well hidden and difficult to observe, are far more numerous and diverse than most people realize. Every rock, every coral head, every crevice harbors multiple species of small invertebrates, hiding from predators and from light. Studies using sophisticated sampling techniques have revealed that the diversity of small invertebrates far exceeds the diversity of visible megafauna. The species that hide in reef crevices include many that play important ecological roles despite their obscurity. Some are deposit feeders, consuming sediment and organic matter. Others are predators, hunting other small animals. Still others are parasites or filter feeders. Each, no matter how small, plays a role in the reef's functioning. Planktonic organisms, active above the reef at night, represent another layer of hidden diversity. Fish larvae, crustacean larvae, and other microscopic animals drift in the water column, barely visible to the naked eye. These planktonic organisms feed on tiny algae and on each other, forming the base of the food web for larger animals. The nocturnal migration, where planktonic animals move from deeper water during the day to shallow water at night, is the largest animal migration on Earth, dwarfing even the migrations of terrestrial animals in terms of total biomass moved. This migration brings nutrients from the deep ocean to the reef and returns animals to the deep as dawn approaches. Understanding the nocturnal reef is important for understanding reef ecology. Many organisms are active at night that are not visible during the daytime surveys that scientists commonly conduct. Estimates of reef biodiversity based on daytime observations underestimate the true diversity. Estimates of reef productivity based on daytime feeding underestimate the true productivity, as night-active organisms consume additional plankton. The reef at night is quieter in some ways but busier in others. The sounds produced by daytime organisms fade, but the sounds produced by nocturnal organisms emerge. The symphony of the reef changes its instrumental section, but continues its eternal performance. A performance that has been ongoing since before humans existed, and that will continue long after humans are gone. Segment 24. The Wisdom of the Reef. Final Reflections and Eternal Truths. As your journey approaches its absolute conclusion, as you sink into the deepest sleep, contemplate the wisdom that the reef offers to those who listen. The reef teaches that connection is fundamental. Every organism is connected to every other organism through webs of food, of shelter, of chemical signals. Remove one thread from the web and the entire weaving changes. Strengthen one connection and the resilience of the entire system increases. The reef shows us that the world is not made of separate, competing things, but rather of deeply interconnected relationships. The reef teaches that diversity is strength. A reef with many species is more resilient than a reef with few species. Each species plays its role, and when multiple species can fulfill similar roles, the system becomes robust. Lose diversity, and the system becomes fragile, vulnerable to disturbance. The same principles apply to human communities and to the broader biosphere. The reef teaches that patience is a virtue. The reef grows slowly, a few millimeters to a few centimeters per year. But over millions of years, this slow growth builds structures thousands of meters tall. The reef teaches us that great achievements come through consistent, patient effort over long time scales. Change the world through small actions taken day after day, year after year. The reef teaches that adaptation is necessary for survival. Corals have adapted to live in clear tropical water where most other creatures would starve. They have adapted to survive the bright light of the shallows, the dim light of the depths. They have adapted to tolerate the salinity of seawater, the pressure of the depths, the temperature variations between seasons. Adapt or perish is a law of life. The reef teaches that recovery is possible. Reefs recover from hurricanes and bleaching events. Forests of coral that are completely destroyed regrow within decades. Species that are nearly wiped out rebound if given the chance. The capacity for recovery is built into living systems. Despair is not warranted as long as we leave room for recovery. The reef teaches that cycles are fundamental. The reef operates on cycles of light and darkness, of tides, of seasons, of climate oscillations. Nothing is static. Everything changes, but changes follow patterns that can be perceived and understood. Within the cycles, there is both stability and change, both structure and dynamism. The reef teaches that reciprocity is natural. Corals provide shelter for zooxanthellae, and zooxanthellae provide nutrition for corals. Fish eat algae, preventing it from smothering the reef, and the reef provides fish with shelter and nurseries. Mangroves protect the reef, and the reef protects mangroves. Every gift is repaid, every service reciprocated in an endless exchange. The reef teaches that death is not an ending, but a transformation. Dead coral becomes the foundation for new coral. The body of a dead fish becomes food for scavengers. The nutrients that were in a dead organism are released and incorporated into new organisms. Death and life are not opposites, but part of a single cycle. The reef teaches that you are not separate from nature, but part of it. The same atoms that make up the reef make up your body. The same processes of growth and decay, of production and consumption that occur in the reef occur in you. You are the reef, and the reef is you. In this profound truth lies the foundation for caring about the reef. We do not protect the reef because it is different from us, something external and foreign. We protect it because it is ourselves, expressed in a different form, made visible and external, so that we can perceive and understand it. The reef, in its eternal presence, in its patient dance across millions of years, teaches us that the most important truths are simple. Connection matters, diversity strengthens, patience accomplishes, adaptation survives, recovery is possible, cycles continue, reciprocity nourishes, death transforms, all life is one. These truths, once perceived, change how we live. We stop trying to control and dominate. We stop trying to extract without giving back. We stop pretending that we are separate. We align ourselves with the reef's way, the way of life, the way of cooperation and connection and eternal transformation. Sleep now, dear listener, knowing that you are held by these eternal truths. Sleep knowing that you are part of something infinite and beautiful, something that stretches across millions of years and encompasses all life on Earth. Sleep knowing that in protecting the reef, you are protecting yourself, protecting the very ground of your own existence. The reef dreams, and in dreaming, you become the reef. You become the light playing across the water. You become the coral building its skeleton grain by grain. You become the fish sheltering in the branches. You become the zooxanthellae capturing light. You become the entire web of life, vast and interconnected and eternal. Rest in this knowing. Rest in this peace. Rest in this unity. Rest well in the eternal arms of the reef. Segment 25. The chemistry of life. Calcium, carbonate, and the building blocks of the reef. Continue drifting deeper into understanding the precise chemistry that allows corals to build their magnificent structures. Calcium carbonate is the fundamental material of coral skeletons. This compound, composed of calcium ions, carbon, and oxygen atoms, forms the crystalline structures that give corals their rigid framework. Seawater is naturally supersaturated with calcium and carbonate ions, meaning that the water contains more of these ions than it would at equilibrium. This supersaturation is what allows corals to build their skeletons relatively easily, simply by providing a location and chemical environment where precipitation can occur. The concentration of calcium in seawater has varied throughout Earth's history. When calcium concentrations are high, corals build faster and larger structures. When calcium concentrations are low, coral growth slows. Over millions of years, the amount of calcium sequestered in reef structures has influenced global ocean chemistry, affecting everything from the acidity of seawater to the cycling of nutrients. Carbonate ions in seawater are produced when carbon dioxide dissolves in water and is converted through a series of chemical reactions. The more carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater, the more carbonate ions are available for coral skeletons. However, there is a limit. When too much carbon dioxide is dissolved, the water becomes more acidic and carbonate ions become less stable. They revert to bicarbonate ions, which cannot be used by corals for skeleton building. Ocean acidification, the ongoing decrease in ocean pH caused by absorption of human-emitted carbon dioxide, is reducing carbonate ion concentrations in seawater. This means that corals must expend more energy to build their skeletons. In some regions, particularly in the deep ocean and in polar regions, the saturation state of the ocean is already approaching levels where carbonate minerals begin to dissolve rather than precipitate. Corals in these regions may struggle to maintain their skeletons. The magnesium concentration in seawater also influences coral skeleton composition. Magnesium can substitute for calcium in the crystalline structure, and the ratio of magnesium to calcium influences the properties of the skeleton. Corals can control this ratio to some extent, but ocean chemistry sets limits on what is possible. The strontium concentration in seawater, though much lower than calcium, is also incorporated into coral skeletons. The strontium to calcium ratio in coral skeletons reflects the strontium to calcium ratio in seawater at the time the skeleton was built. Scientists can use this ratio to determine the water temperature at the time the skeleton was formed, making coral skeletons valuable records of past ocean conditions. The building of a coral skeleton requires the active transport of calcium ions, the active expulsion of protons to increase alkalinity in the space where calcification occurs, and the precise control of supersaturation to ensure that crystal precipitation happens exactly where it is needed. This is an energy-intensive process, requiring the coral to spend a significant fraction of its photosynthetically derived energy on skeleton building rather than on growth or reproduction. In the reef, the skeleton building process is so active that it creates local changes in seawater chemistry. The pH of the water in and around growing corals becomes higher than in the surrounding water. Carbon dioxide is consumed. Oxygen is produced. The chemical environment of a thriving reef is quite different from the surrounding ocean. As water temperatures rise, corals expend more energy on metabolism and less on skeleton building. Growth rates slow even before bleaching occurs. As ocean acidification progresses, the energy required to build skeletons increases. Corals are caught between two pressures: increasing metabolic costs from warming and increasing structural costs from acidification. Both together create a squeeze that many corals will struggle to survive. The chemistry of the reef is thus intimately connected to climate change. The very mechanisms by which corals have evolved to thrive in tropical waters, mechanisms that depend on specific temperature and chemical ranges, are being disrupted by human activities. The chemistry that enables the reef today may become incompatible with coral survival in the future. Segment 26. The Engineers and Builders. Coralline algae, sponges, and the reef's construction crew. Let your mind drift now to contemplate the many organisms beyond corals that contribute to building and maintaining the reef structure. Coralline algae are among the most important reef builders. These calcifying red algae deposit calcium carbonate, creating pink or purple crusts on reef surfaces. The rate at which coralline algae accumulate calcium carbonate can rival that of corals, making them major contributors to reef accretion. In some reefs, particularly in deeper or cooler waters, coralline algae may contribute more to reef structure than corals do. The presence of coralline algae indicates reef health. When reefs are stressed, coralline algae coverage often declines. Scientists use coralline algae cover as an indicator of reef condition. Reefs with high coralline algae coverage tend to be productive and resilient. Reefs with low coralline algae coverage are often stressed or degraded. Coralline algae also play an important role in coral recruitment. The chemical signals released by coralline algae attract coral larvae, triggering settlement. The bacteria living on coralline algae surfaces further promote coral larval settlement. Without coralline algae, coral larvae have difficulty finding suitable locations to settle and metamorphose. Crustose coralline algae, the encrusting varieties, form a living pavement on reef surfaces, binding rubble together and creating a stable platform on which other organisms can settle. Branching coralline algae form three-dimensional structures that provide shelter for small organisms. Both growth forms contribute to reef structure and function. Sponges are prolific throughout reefs, contributing to both reef structure and reef erosion. Some sponges are filter feeders, pumping vast quantities of water through their tissues and removing suspended particles. A large sponge can filter hundreds of liters of water per day, removing plankton, bacteria, and small particles. This filtering activity makes sponges important for controlling plankton populations and maintaining water clarity. Boring sponges excavate tunnels through coral skeletons, removing material bit by bit. This boring activity seems damaging, but it actually helps the reef by preventing the reef from becoming too compacted, by creating pathways for water flow, and by creating microhabitats for small organisms. The balance between sponge boring and coral growth determines the net structure of the reef. Bivalves, including oysters and clams, also bore into coral and rock. Some bivalves bore into coral skulls to create protective chambers. Others bore into rock, creating structural weakness. The cumulative effect of boring by many different organisms is significant, shaping the reef's structure over time. Worms of various types contribute to reef ecology and structure. Some worms are predators, controlling populations of small invertebrates. Others are filter feeders, removing plankton from the water. Still others are deposit feeders, consuming sediment and organic matter. The burrowing activities of worms create tunnels in sediment and coral, affecting water flow and structure. Tunicates, also known as sea squirts, are colonial organisms that settle on reef surfaces and filter feed. Some tunicate colonies are large and conspicuous, others are small and cryptic. Collectively, tunicates can remove significant quantities of plankton from reef waters. Echinoderms, including sea stars, brittle stars, and sea cucumbers, contribute to reef function in multiple ways. Some are predators, some are detritivores, consuming dead organic matter. Sea cucumbers are particularly important for nutrient cycling, consuming sediment and organic matter, and producing fecal pellets that are rich in usable nutrients. The reef is not built by corals alone, but rather by a consortium of organisms, each contributing in its own way. The loss of any of these organisms would change the reef's structure and function. A thriving reef requires the participation of all its members, from the largest fish to the smallest bacterium. Segment 27. The Dance of Reproduction. Sexuality, gender, and the perpetuation of life. Allow your consciousness to explore the remarkable diversity of reproductive strategies found in reef organisms. Corals have diverse reproductive strategies. Some corals are hermaphrodites containing both male and female gonads. Others are dioecious, with separate male and female individuals. Some corals are sequential hermaphrodites, changing sex from year to year. This diversity of sexual strategies allows corals to adapt to different environmental conditions and to maintain genetic diversity. The timing of coral spawning is one of the most synchronized biological phenomena on Earth. Multiple coral species spawn on the same night, often within a few hours of each other. This synchronization is controlled by multiple environmental cues, including the phase of the moon, the time of year, and the water temperature. The function of this synchronization is to maximize the chances of fertilization by ensuring that eggs and sperm from different individuals meet in the water column. The gamete bundles released during coral spawning are packages of both eggs and sperm. Male gametes are motile, swimming toward eggs. Female gametes are larger, containing stored reserves of nutrients. When a sperm fertilizes an egg, the resulting zygote begins to divide. The earliest divisions create a hollow ball of cells called a blastula. Further development creates a swimming larva with sensory organs and muscle cells. The planktonic larval stage is crucial for coral population genetics. Larvae can drift long distances, allowing them to colonize distant reefs and bringing genetic material from one reef population to another. The longer the larval period, the greater the potential for dispersal. Some coral larvae can remain in the plankton for weeks or even months, traveling hundreds of kilometers before settling. Fish reproduction is even more diverse than coral reproduction. Some fish are sequential hermaphrodites, changing sex in response to social conditions. A dominant male that dies may be replaced by a female that transforms into a male. Some fish are simultaneous hermaphrodites, containing both male and female reproductive organs and mating with partners that also contain both. Some fish are gonocorists, with fixed sexes that do not change. Many reef fish form pairs for mating, with both males and females contributing to care of the eggs. Some fish form groups where one male mates with multiple females. Others form groups where dominant females mate with subordinate males. The social organization of fish communities influences mating patterns and genetic diversity. Fish spawning is often synchronized with environmental cues, particularly with the phase of the moon. Some fish spawn during full moons, others spawn during new moons. The synchronization ensures that eggs are released at times when conditions are favorable for larval survival. The larvae that result from synchronized spawning benefit from abundant plankton and from the presence of many other larvae, which may provide some protection through sheer numbers. Some fish guard their eggs and young, protecting them from predators until they reach a size where they can fend for themselves. Others release their eggs into the water column and provide no parental care. The level of parental investment varies enormously among fish species, reflecting different evolutionary strategies. Crustaceans have complex reproductive strategies. Some crustaceans broadcast spawn, releasing larvae into the water column like fish. Others carry their eggs and young, protecting them until they are ready to face the open ocean. Shrimp can be sequential hermaphrodites, changing sex as they grow larger and more able to produce eggs. The diversity of crustacean reproduction ensures that diverse ecological roles are filled. Mollusks, including clams, snails, and cephalopods, also exhibit remarkable reproductive diversity. Some mollusks are broadcast spawners. Others are direct developers, with females laying eggs that develop without a planktonic larval stage. Cephalopods, including octopuses and squid, have complex mating behaviors and excellent parents that guard eggs until they hatch. The reef's reproductive synchronization extends beyond individual species. Fish aggregations form at specific times and places. Coral spawning occurs simultaneously across multiple species. The planktonic larvae released by these synchronized spawning events create a pulse of resources that supports larval fish and invertebrates. The synchronization of reproductive events is one of the reef's most remarkable features. Segment 28. The Nurseries and Schools. Juvenile habitats, settlement dynamics, and the reef's future recruits. Contemplate now the crucial early stages of reef life, the nurseries where young organisms grow in relative safety before joining the adult reef community. Seagrass meadows and mangrove forests serve as nurseries for countless reef fish species. Young fish born on the reef or in offshore nurseries drift as larvae into these shallow water ecosystems. Here they find abundant shelter among the roots and blades of plants. Here they find abundant food in the form of small invertebrates and algae. Here they are protected from large predators that roam the open reef. The importance of these nursery habitats is difficult to overestimate. Surveys have shown that reefs without adjacent seagrass or mangrove nurseries support far fewer fish than reefs with healthy nurseries. The nursery habitats provide the early growth that allows fish to reach a size where they can survive on the open reef. The journey from nursery habitat to reef is dangerous. As fish grow larger, they gradually venture further from the shelter of seagrass and mangrove. Eventually, they make the transition to the open reef. Many die during this transition, falling prey to predators. Those that survive settle on the reef, claiming a territory or joining a school. Settlement habitat on the reef is not uniformly suitable. Some areas are highly preferred by settling fish, with hundreds of young fish crowding into small areas. Other areas are avoided, remaining empty despite being suitable for settlement. The preference appears to be based on the presence of other fish, on the acoustic signals produced by reef organisms, and on the presence of suitable shelter. The reef's acoustic environment influences where fish settle. As mentioned before, healthy reefs produce intense biotic sounds. Larvae use these sounds as cues to locate suitable settlement habitat. Reefs in noisy environments, near shipping lanes, or in areas with heavy fishing activity produce degraded soundscapes that may attract fewer settling larvae. The loss of acoustic signals may reduce recruitment to degraded reefs, preventing recovery. The timing of settlement is crucial. A fish that settles during a period of abundance, with plenty of food and shelter, has a better chance of surviving than a fish that settles during a period of scarcity. Environmental conditions fluctuate on multiple timescales, from seasons to years to decades. Fish settlement pulses, when thousands of young fish settle on a reef at once, tend to occur when environmental conditions are favorable. Settlement success varies dramatically from year to year. In some years, recruitment is abundant, with thousands of young fish settling per square meter of reef. In other years, recruitment is nearly absent, with almost no young fish settling. This variability creates boom and bust cycles in fish populations, with strong recruitment years leading to population increases several years later as the cohort matures. Juvenile fish growth rates are influenced by food availability, temperature, and density-dependent factors like competition and predation. In areas with abundant plankton, juvenile fish grow rapidly. In areas with limited food, growth is slow. Temperature influences metabolic rates, with warmer water allowing faster growth but higher energy requirements. High densities of juvenile fish create competition for food and space, slowing growth rates. The size structure of the fish population influences population dynamics. A population composed mainly of old, large fish has different productivity and resilience characteristics than a population composed mainly of young, small fish. Harvesting practices that remove primarily large fish change the age and size structure of populations, reducing reproductive output because large fish are more fecund than small fish. Adult fish often return to the reef where they settled as juveniles. This site fidelity means that the supply of new recruits to a reef is not only influenced by current conditions on that reef, but also by conditions on that reef several years before, during the settlement and early growth period of the fish that are now recruiting. Segment 29. The night hunters. Nocturnal predators, feeding strategies, and the economics of hunting. Drift deeper into the nocturnal realm, exploring the sophisticated hunting strategies of predators that feed under cover of darkness. Nocturnal predators are adapted to hunt with minimal light. Many have large eyes that gather every available photon. Others have evolved lateral line systems, organs that sense vibrations in the water, allowing them to locate prey without relying on vision. Still others have evolved specialized sensory systems for detecting electrical fields generated by muscle contractions in living animals. Squirrelfish are among the most abundant nocturnal fish on reefs. They have enormous eyes that are exquisitely sensitive to light. During the day, they hide deep in reef crevices, where light penetration is minimal. At night, they emerge to feed on small crustaceans and fish larvae. Their bright red coloration, invisible in the deep water where they hide by day, may serve some communicative function at night. Octopuses are nocturnal predators of remarkable intelligence. They hunt crustaceans, fish, and mollusks with precision, using their 8 arms to explore reef crevices and their powerful suckers to grasp prey. An octopus can change color in milliseconds, using chromatophores in its skin to match the background. This color change serves both hunting and defense functions, allowing the octopus to approach prey undetected while also allowing it to avoid predators. Mantis shrimp are small predators with remarkable vision and powerful claws. They can see colors that humans cannot perceive, including ultraviolet and polarized light. Their claws can strike prey with the force of a bullet, generating shock waves that stun prey even if the claw misses direct contact. A mantis shrimp can process visual information faster than almost any other animal, allowing it to track fast-moving prey and strike with precision. Sharks are apex predators that hunt during both day and night. Some sharks are active nocturnal hunters, using their powerful sense of smell to locate prey in the darkness. Others are ambush predators, lying motionless on the reef until prey passes close by. The role of sharks in reef ecosystems has been poorly understood for many years, but recent research shows that sharks are crucial for maintaining the structure of fish communities and for preventing the overabundance of smaller predators. Groupers are large predatory fish that hunt during the day but also at night. Some groupers are piscivores, feeding exclusively on fish. Others are generalists, feeding on fish, crustaceans, and cephalopods. Large groupers can exert top-down control on fish communities, suppressing the abundance of smaller fish through predation. Overfishing of large groupers has led to shifts in fish communities, with smaller predatory fish becoming more abundant. Hunting success rates for nocturnal predators are influenced by visibility, by the abundance and size of prey, by the presence of competitors, and by the presence of predators that might prey on the hunter itself. On moonless nights, when visibility is lowest, predators with the best vision relative to their prey have a competitive advantage. On bright moonlit nights, visibility improves, giving an advantage to prey species that can use vision to detect predators. The energetics of nocturnal hunting are complex. The energy required to hunt must be offset by the energy obtained from eating prey. If food is scarce, the energy expenditure of hunting may exceed the energy gained from consuming prey, resulting in a net loss. Predators must therefore locate areas of high prey abundance to make hunting worthwhile. This drives predators to congregate in areas where prey is abundant. The learning capacity of predators influences hunting success. Predators that can learn where prey is abundant, when prey is active, and which hunting strategies are most successful become more efficient hunters. This learning occurs through individual experience and also in some species through cultural transmission, where young animals learn from older animals. Hunting strategies vary among predator species and even among individuals within a species. Some predators are stalkers, approaching prey slowly and then striking with a burst of speed. Others are sit-and-wait predators, remaining motionless until prey approaches within striking distance. Some actively search for prey, swimming through the water in a search pattern. The diversity of hunting strategies ensures that prey species cannot evolve a single defense that protects against all predators. A final meditation on connection, transformation, and rebirth. As your eyelids grow heavier and your breathing deepens, settle into the final contemplation of the reef's eternal cycles of life, death, and transformation. In the reef, nothing is ever truly lost. The coral that dies becomes the foundation for new coral. The fish that is eaten becomes nutrition for the predator. The leaves that fall from mangroves dissolve into organic compounds that feed reef organisms. The skeleton of the reef is built from the accumulated remains of billions of organisms that lived and died over millions of years. This principle of transformation is fundamental to all life. The atoms that make up your body were once part of ancient rocks. They were taken up by plants and incorporated into leaves and wood. The plants were eaten by animals, and the atoms were incorporated into flesh and blood. The animals died, and the atoms were released to the environment. Throughout this entire cycle, the same atoms are used and reused, transformed from one form to another, always part of some living thing or waiting to become part of a living thing. In this cycle, you are not separate from the reef. The calcium in your bones came from the food you ate, and ultimately from rocks that were dissolved by water. The oxygen you breathe was produced by photosynthesis, possibly including photosynthesis that occurred in the ocean. The water that makes up your body has cycled through countless organisms and through the ocean and atmosphere billions of times. To protect the reef is to protect yourself. In protecting the reef, you are protecting the systems that produce oxygen, that cycle nutrients, that create the conditions where all life, including human life, can exist. In protecting the reef, you are protecting the source of half your dinner plate, as fish and other seafood are primary protein sources for billions of people. The future of the reef is not predetermined. The outcome depends on the choices we make today. Every fraction of a degree of warming prevented, every ton of carbon dioxide kept out of the atmosphere, every reef protected from local pollution and overfishing. Every choice we make increases the probability that reefs will persist and thrive into the future. The reef invites us to participate in its eternal cycle, to align our actions with the long-term health of the systems that sustain all life. The reef teaches us that competition and cooperation are not opposites, that neither one is intrinsically better than the other, but rather that both are necessary for the functioning of a healthy system. The reef teaches us that diversity is strength. A reef with many species is more resilient and more productive than a reef with few species. The same principle applies to human societies. Diversity of perspectives, diversity of cultures, diversity of ways of knowing all contribute to the resilience and health of human communities. The reef teaches us that time moves on multiple scales. The daily rhythms of light and darkness, the seasonal patterns, the longer cycles of climate oscillations, the vast spans of geological time. The reef teaches us that we live on multiple timescales simultaneously, that we must care for the present while also considering the long-term future. In the ancient reefs, reefs that lived millions of years ago and are now fossilized into rock, we can read a record of the planet's past. In the living reefs today, we see the present state of the ocean. In the reefs of the future, we will see the consequences of our choices. The choice is ours, and the time is now. The reef does not ask for our permission to be beautiful, to be productive, to support the abundance of life. The reef simply is, and it invites us to join in, to align ourselves with its rhythms, to participate in the eternal dance of life and death and rebirth. Sleep now, knowing that you are part of this eternal cycle. Sleep knowing that even in sleep, your body is participating in the transformation of matter and energy that characterizes all life. Sleep knowing that when you wake, you can choose to act in ways that support the reef, that support the long-term health of the living world. The reef dreams eternal dreams, dreams of vast expanses of coral, of fish in their millions, of light dancing through water, of the slow accumulation of life over millions of years. In dreaming, you join the reef in its eternal dreaming. You become the reef, and the reef becomes you. Rest well, dear listener. Rest in the peace of the reef. Rest in the knowledge that you are held by the vast cycles of life that have been operating since life began on Earth and that will continue long after you are gone. Rest in the unity of all life, in the knowledge that there is no boundary between yourself and the reef, between yourself and the ocean, between yourself and the living world. Sleep now and dream the reef's eternal dreams.